Hey everyone, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today I am reviewing the BASN MTPRO IEMs. These have a retail price of $199, but obviously with some sales or prices fluctuating, it may change based off the time and where you look when you research these later, but I always base it off the retail price. I will have a generic affiliate link in the description below to take you to the Amazon website as well as the BASN website. This was provided to me for review. It won't affect what I say about it, but I always want to say that as full disclosure. No money was exchanged in any way, and BASN has no idea what I had to say about this product prior to releasing my review. So I do want to thank BASN for sending this, but with that being said, let's move on. Now the MT Pro comes in black, gold, silver, or purple finishes. They all come with a soft metallic finish, so it's nothing too bold or flashy, but at least they give you some options. Now before I get into all the specs and features and what I think about sound quality, I want to start with the case. Now when I did the unboxing, I was quite surprised because I don't typically research much of the products I get prior to listening to them and unboxing them, because I don't want to have some preconceived notion. But this really nice metal case, which actually has a latch that works and doesn't feel too cheap, is included. This is a $200 IEM, so it's to be expected that you're going to have some things that are better or worse than others in this price range. It's just what the manufacturer deems valuable for what they're including. But I do want to unbox this or open it and show you how it's laid out. Now I've been using these, so this is where I stuffed my IEMs. When you actually unbox it in real life, the IEMs themselves are part of the, styrofoam or packaging, if you will, and then the case has all the accessories. But speaking of accessories, look at how much they give you. They give you a 6.3 millimeter adapter to plug it into a larger jack if that's what you're using. They have a cleaning tool included. Obviously you get, if you're noticing, 2 cables, and this is what's really cool about this. They use OCC cables. The dark brown is a standard analog cable, obviously unbalanced, but there's no microphone or anything, and look, I have the Apple dongle still connected to it. This lighter silver cable actually has an inline microphone. Now this wire is a little bit shorter than the other one, but there is an inline mic which has the action button and then the plus and minus for your volume, which is cool. Look at the amount of tips they give you. There's a lot of tools. There's a grabber tool. You have so many different tips in sizes and even materials. This is also one of the few that comes with like a double flange, and just by luck, that's what fell out. But basically you have, silicone and memory foam. You have single flange, double, and even triple flange tips. Now, I ended up going with the double flange tips because they fit me the best with this particular IEM. I've never really used double flange before. I've always stuck with a single, which doesn't have any extra, rim on it or anything like that. But they provided the best seal, comfort, and fit. So what I do like, and what I wanted to start with the unboxing, is just how many tips are included, because that means your cost of ownership should be low, because you should find a tip included with this that works perfectly for your ear. All right, so I obviously have the gold version, and I want to point out a few things. So this used a CNC-milled metal chassis. It's a closed back design, and it uses a 14.5 millimeter planar magnetic driver. The driver on this IEM is double-sided, meaning magnets are on both sides of the transducer, which typically gives you better power handling and accuracy at higher listening volumes. It's not always the case, but it does help with performance at a more extreme level. The drivers are rated at 32 ohms and have a sensitivity of 102 decibels, so they're not the easiest IEM to drive, but over 100 decibels at 32 ohms means that you should be able to power it with anything. Just to prove a point, I use these a lot just using a little $10 Apple dongle, and they get more than loud enough. You don't have to invest in high-end source gear to still enjoy a good sound, even from a $200 IEM like this. I do like that they didn't do anything overly fancy with the design. It's a nice clean logo, and it doesn't really show fingerprints that well. Because of this beveled edge, there's a little bit of a shine to it. Overall, it's a very traditional looking closed back shape. I think some people from looking at it might even think it's a wireless option just because of how sleek the housing is. Now this uses an MMCX connector, which some people like and don't. Some people prefer 2-pin. However, one of the benefits of MMCX is the fact that once you snap it in, which is going to be a little firm with this, it's actually a pretty good connector. So you can hear that click into place. You can rotate this slightly. So the ear hooks on these are really nice. They're not like, overly stiff or loose. They have a good balance of being comfortable but giving you enough support for the wire. So once you get these in, if you have to twist the cable just slightly to perfectly fit your ear, you can do that, and that helps with the comfort for long-term wear. Also, something to keep in mind with the comfort is the weight, and these weigh close to 8 grams each with the ear tip installed, at least the silicone ear tip installed. Now that weight does come from the build quality. They feel extremely solid. However, most IEMs do feel great when you first unbox them. Some cheaper ones can be a little skittish, but with the metal chassis and the way it's put together, there's no obvious seams or glue marks or anything that looks like it'll come apart. So they're built well, and because of that metal enclosure, that's where the weight is coming from. Now I know some people are concerned with the bore size, like the actual tip of the IEM before these tips get put on. So I'm going to measure that and show you real quick. The outer edge is 6.3 millimeters, and the inside, if you measure just inside that little lip, is 5.3 millimeters. So it's pretty common. That should fit most common tips. It's a circular shape, so there's nothing weird going on with the design. So if you do want to buy your own tips or have your own favorites, like a spin fit, for example, you can use that no problem with these.
Now I mentioned that the MTPro comes with a cable that has an inline microphone, and this is what that microphone sounds like. It actually adds a little bit of warmth to it. It does not sound like a tin can, but it's not overly clear and bright and present either. It's also not super sensitive, so if you are a very soft-spoken person, don't expect this to be used for like extended conference calls, but it's a passable, usable cable in case you are using this on the go, and I still think it does a better job than some other ones that I've used that come with an inline cable. This does work really well for gaming, especially on PlayStation where you can boost the microphone gain, or same with PC. However, even on Xbox, my friend said they could hear me fine. I'll get into the gaming side after, but I just wanted to show you what the microphone sounded like.
So I wanted to start with the objective measurement side of things, the sound quality from a measured point of view and not just my opinion. This is how my rig measures, which is an IEC 711 clone. This is also the first time I'm showing my SquigLink page, which isn't publicly available at the time of filming this. However, it might go live fairly soon. I will have a link in the description below, so if the format looks different than what you're used to seeing on my old measurements, this is probably what I'll go with going forward, just to make life easier. So, plus everyone can find them after the fact. With that being said, you can see that the MTPro has a very wide and emphasized bass region. It peaks, let's say, at 80 hertz, but it's not a sharp peak. It is a very broad, emphasized lift. Now, there's a little bit of sub-bass roll-off. However, there's still plenty of sub-bass because of the large emphasis as a whole. And that bass emphasis does carry into the mid-range, producing a heavier, thicker, lower mid-range sound. It does recess, and you can see the dip, the lowest point of the frequency chart being right about the 1 kilohertz mark, only to pick back up between 2 and 3K, fall back off a little bit again, and then you see a lift in the treble extension area. This is a fairly unique presentation. When you get into this price range, you can have huge variance of sound. Honestly, IEMs can have such a drastic difference in sound quality, of course, which is why people shop and try to find the right one. But take the measurements for what you will. I just want to show you how it sounds out of the box, and then I'll describe how that performs in real life, and if there's anything you can change about it, what you would change. So when it comes to the subjective side, the first thing I want to start with this is planar magnetic drivers have their own unique sound presentation compared to dynamic, or dynamic with BAs, like a hybrid driver system, balanced armature. Or if you look at a purely BA system, those have a different tonality as well. So there are pros and cons to each one, and some people like different aspects of each driver. Planars have extremely fast transients. They're almost plucky in nature, which is exactly what it sounds like. They have very fast attack and decay, so the speed is there, and you also really have typically good bass texture as a result, just by the nature of the driver. However, what I've found in a lot of cases is they don't have the same intimacy or warmth that I typically get with a pure dynamic driver. I usually like the tonality of dynamic drivers better, but there are certain times where I really appreciate the way a planar magnetic presents sound. So it's not going to be for everybody, but with that being said, let's talk about the bass. So the bass is strong, it's emphasized, and it does lead to that warmer presentation I was mentioning earlier, that warm, thick presentation. So, but it's not overly rumbly. You know, when you look at the really deep bass, if you're watching a movie and you're expecting that crazy strong sub bass, these have quite a bit. However, the heft of the bass is more in the 80 hertz region. You know, it still sounds deep as a result, but we're not talking extremely strong sub bass. And then to go along with that, when you get into a very fast, hard-hitting rock song, they don't have incredibly punchy bass either, because the emphasis is on a little bit on the lower side. So this lends itself well for EDM, jazz, hip-hop, things like that. But if you're a heavy rock listener, you might want to adjust the EQ response a little bit to make it sound a little bit more punchy. The bass is still well textured. It's just not as dynamic sounding as a harder hitting IEM that may not have the same thickness or depth that this has on the lower bass. So it kind of just depends what you're looking for. Now, when you get into the mid-range, this is where the presentation is fairly unique. I already mentioned that it's slightly recessed when we looked at the measurement side, and that does lead to vocals stepping back a little bit in the mix. The bass has heaviness to it, it has width to it, and that is always going to affect your mid-range. Otherwise, it'll cancel each other out and they would sound more flat. So it's not overly done. It's not so extreme that I'm losing the vocals in the mix. They're just not a dominant force in the track. And because of the way the tuning is done, it also leads to string instruments not sounding as forward or lively as something of a dynamic or a different tune, even a BA, that typically has a stronger upper mid-range presentation. The SimGot EA500 is a bit opposite of this. That's an $80 IEM. Extremely high detail and resolution, but not necessarily the same bass. And it's almost so much detail and resolution that some people might find that a little bit jarring or offensive. This overall is a less offensive presentation because of that recess. Now you still get the detail. It has kind of a crispy, thin, clear presentation of the upper mids, with the lower mids having some warmth. So you may find some vocals, like a deeper male vocal, be a little bit stronger and heavier than you're used to hearing, and at the same time, something that has a more delicate guitar or a piano note or a lighter vocal might sound a little bit softer. It's not anemic. It's not so dark that you find that you're missing it. It's just, it sways what parts of the track are more dominant than the others. Now, what I really like about the tuning of this is when you get into the way the upper treble extension is, just the treble tuning in general is a really fun sound because of this width and presentation that it has. And typically, I don't get a lot of soundstage and width in a closed back IEM, and especially a planar magnetic IEM. These stage so incredibly well, which I'm getting ahead of myself, but I might as well get into Soundstage now. This Soundstage is immensely wide, and part of that does come from that frequency response tuning. Whenever you have a dip in that 1000 hertz range, the 1 kilohertz range, it tends to open up the upper mid-range and treble more, and that's what happens here. So even though it may not be perfect from a tonality and timbre standpoint, it's a little bit off than what a normal natural sound may be. It's not bad, but it also gives you a very immersive, wide listening experience. I don't have that closet-like everything is in my head IEM presentation, which is a very rewarding listen when you use these and get that width. It sounds more lively and fun, and the music just sounds more expansive. That's a huge win and something I really like with the way the MT Pros are tuned. And that leads me to the gaming side of things. Now, I have chapters below, so if you don't care about the gaming perspective, feel free to skip ahead. But this unique presentation of sound as far as like the soundstage goes and imaging, mixed with that planar magnetic speed and detail retrieval, provides an incredibly rewarding gaming experience. These are my favorite IEMs I've ever used for gaming. I'm up to about, 20 pairs now. And these just did something super special. The biggest advantage was it blended the soundstage and the imaging so well.
These things should not have as wide of a soundstage as they do.
What I've disliked with IEMs in the past is I don't get the same sense of depth that a better headphone typically gives me. IEMs can image really well, and from a tuning perspective, you get an amazing bang for your buck, but I don't get the same level of immersion in the game because the depth in the soundstage isn't there, which is mitigated by this. Then because these things are so incredibly comfortable, I can wear these for a very long gaming session. The inline mic is passable. However, you can use an Antlion Kimura microphone, which I believe is about $40 to $60. I'll have to double check, but I'll have a link in the description below. You can have a boom mic on these and have a seriously incredible gaming system set up that does well on the open world side. If you're playing single story or single player open world campaign style games, you'll enjoy that because this has that rich wide bass, that heavy bass, where tonality and timbre isn't as much of an issue because it's a video game. You don't have a specific expectation on how the game should sound. What you do get is that nice, rich, rewarding bass mixed with the very inoffensive mid-range and treble tuning, meaning it's not too sharp, it's not harsh, it doesn't hurt your ear when a loud part happens. And then this incredibly wide soundstage. I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed playing games on this, both the single story and in competitive FPS. They seriously kick butt in that regard. Now, just to sweeten the deal even further and to kind of wrap up, there is another inherent advantage to a large planar magnetic driver like this that has magnets on both sides of the transducer, and that's EQ tuning, equalizers. When you are changing the EQ or the frequency response, you can usually only push things so far. Certain drivers, IEMs, headphones, speakers, they don't like to be tampered with too much. It can have negative consequences. I've found that some headsets, for example, if you push the bass in any way, they lose so much clarity and detail that you're sacrificing one thing over the other. And if you try to improve the resolution or detail retrieval of a headphone that may not be as resolving or clear, or an IEM, you are making it sound sharp and fatiguing, but you're not necessarily gaining that extra resolution and detail. You're kind of like cheating it a little bit to try to make it better. These don't need a lot of emphasis in the treble region just to bring out more detail. They have a natural detail presentation. It's just tuned to be slightly recessed in a certain area. And if you find the bass too offensive, you can just reduce it a little bit. It's very easy to reduce bass on any product because it doesn't really have too many negative consequences. And because you could do that, then you can boost a specific bass area if you want it to be more punchy for rock. If you wanted to hit deeper for movies or explosions in a certain game, for example. You can do all that, and these drivers handle it with ease. So think of the tuning as a good bass tune that has a wide, fairly inoffensive, heavier, thick presentation with a crispy but thin mid-range. But with EQ, you can kind of make it sound however you want. And then you factor in the build quality and all these accessories. And I think the design is nice too, but that's more of a subjective thing. I don't want everyone to say something is amazing looking or not because it's more of your preference. I like the understated design. It's not too flashy, especially if you get it in black or silver. So that wraps up the review. I hope you found it helpful and learned something new about an IEM that frankly I wasn't too familiar with prior to covering this. I haven't used or listened to a BASN product before, and this has been a blast. I've really enjoyed this sound. This is my #1 gaming IEM now, and I will be using this with the Antlion Kimura as my go-to for when I don't want to wear something larger and heavier on my ear. So with that being said, I hope you found this review helpful. I'd love to see you at the next one, so don't forget to like and subscribe. Drop a comment, let me know what you think about this, and I'll see you at the next video. Take care.